Hi everyone. Welcome to Module 2. This is October 16th, 2012, and we're continuing our conversation about life in poverty. I hope that you all are having a great week and that you are beginning to feel pretty confident with your work through Blackboard. More and more of you are very seamlessly being able to submit questions and your assignments, and we'll continue to work through those issues. So stay patient. Okay, our content for today is the impact of poverty and affective development. And we're really going to be exploring some very controversial issues. And I'm going to be challenging you to think about how they fit with your instruction, with your children in your classrooms, with your school, and also within society. Some big questions that I'm going to ask you to think about include who are your students, and then very specifically, what can you do to support them? Just a couple of reminders. The content for this module is all now held in the October 16th folder on Blackboard, and all of your assignments are due by 4 p.m. 2 weeks from today. I'm recording on October 16th, so that is October the 30th. The last time that we were together, we talked a lot about life in poverty. I shared quite a bit of research about the brain and how poverty might impact brain development and later school success. We discussed a number of studies, and my goal was to cause you to think a little bit about how living without resources can change a child's opportunity to be successful in school. One of the things that I emphasized was that this was not about love. It wasn't about how much a child's parents loved him or her, but it was really about access to resources, which is what poverty is all about. Today, I'd like to begin our conversation with a challenge to you to experience a little bit about what it feels like to live in poverty. Now, I am certainly the first to suggest that those of us who have never lived in poverty will never know what it really feels like. But we do have a little activity that we're going to try, that I'm going to have you try from your computers to get a little bit of a sense of what it feels like to live in poverty. Okay, so I'm going to ask you in a moment to go to this website on your computer. I am not sure that you're going to be able to click on it directly from the PowerPoint, but it's a pretty simple website address that you can easily go to, or you might even Google Play Spent, and it will take you directly to the home page. The home page is going to look like the screenshot that I have captured in this slide. You will be prompted to accept the challenge, as you can see in the orange bar toward the bottom of the page. What you'll do is you'll click on this, and then this program will take you through a series of questions. And in those questions, you will be provided with a number of options that you can, from which you can select. And each of those options that you do select will take you through to a series of additional questions and decisions that you have to make. So I'm going to leave you now. Before you go forward with my presentation, I hope that you will go to Play Spent and explore a little bit about some of the decisions that folks who live in poverty face every day. Okay, so you're back from playing Spent. Probably it did not feel much like a game for you. I know that when all of the times that I have gone through this process, I have walked away from it with some very, very strong feelings and emotions, and I am wondering if perhaps you may have as well. So the way that we're going to address this then is with your first assignment, and this is Module 2, Assignment 1. You will find it in Blackboard. You'll find a place for you to click on it, and it will look a lot like the screenshot that I have captured here on this PowerPoint slide. You'll see where the blue arrow is pointing. That arrow is pointing to a button on the page that says Create Thread. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to go to this assignment and to create a thread. If you've not ever created a thread before, what this means is that you are opening up a conversation. And since we don't have an opportunity to get in small groups or pair and share as we might do if we were a face-to-face class, this is the way that we will have class discussions. And so now that we've mastered submission of assignments, we're going to toe test a little bit deeper into the waters of online learning, and discussion forums are a very popular method for creating discussions among students who are taking online classes and participating from their home in their pajamas or their sweatsuits or however. So as a result of your work with Play Spent, and I'm wondering how many of you did it more than once or twice or multiple times, at any rate, you will create a thread, and the requirements for this assignment there are two requirements. Number one, you must create your own thread. And then secondly, you must read other classmates' threads, and you must make a comment on at least two of them. So here we have just a little bit more information about the Play Spent discussion forum. This is actually what you will see when you look at the assignment in Blackboard. It is designed to give you an opportunity for class discussion electronically, probably not as effective as face-to-face, but the nice part about online forum discussions is that you can return to them later and revisit them and add additional thoughts as you've had more time to consider the topic. Again, you must begin a thread, and you must comment on at least two classmates' threads. So I've given you a couple of prompts. Of course, you may take this in any direction you'd like to take it, but the prompts that I am offering are, what did you learn from this exercise? What were some of the feelings that you had as you moved through the month of the exercise? Will it change you in any way, and why or why not? Just as a reminder, this activity should be completed by 4 o'clock on October 30th, although I hope that you'll do this much sooner so that we can have some extended conversations through the discussion forum. Now, one little twist on this. You will enter your discussion information, your thread comments, in one place on Blackboard. But that discussion forum does not provide me with a way to record that you actually did this, in other words, to record your grade. So what I have done is I have created a second assignment, and that is the place where you will submit your grade. All you'll do there is copy and paste your initial thread comment into the submission space and then hit submit. And I will go back and read your comments on other person's threads as I read through the entire document. Okay, hopefully that's clear, and you are ready to complete your first assignment for this second module. My purpose with Play Spent and with other activities that we engaged in the first class was to begin to cause us all to think about life in poverty and how it affects students. The morning before they come to school, the night that they're trying to complete homework assignments, and in general, their entire life living without resources. What we're going to explore in this class is the impact of poverty in affective development. And we are going to look deep into this area, and I'm going to challenge you to do some readings outside of this PowerPoint to more broadly inform your belief system about the impact of poverty on affective development. Now, when we talk about affective development, again, we're thinking about social development and emotional development, all of the people-oriented pieces of our lives. A real foundation for what I'm going to be talking about is the work of Ruby Payne. This is a screenshot of a book that really catapulted her into notoriety. It is called A Framework for Understanding Poverty. I know that many school districts across the nation have used this book as a book study book, a study opportunity with their professional learning communities. This has been a very widely read book. Now, it has also become a very controversial book, and I understand that controversy, and we're going to explore the controversy at the conclusion of the PowerPoint that I am presentation that I'm making right now. What I'm going to be doing is trying to give you an overview of the high points of this book. Since I did not require you to purchase it and read it, I want to just give you some basic information. If you have had a what we know of as a Ruby Payne training, then this will be very familiar for you. If you have not, then I will be sharing with you some information that may be new information, and again is somewhat controversial. So before we get started, I have pulled and inserted a little video clip from Ruby Payne in which she addresses some of the controversy that surrounds her work.
What we do with all these strategies is they are simply tools to build the capacity of students and adults. A lot of people say to me, "Aren't you trying to change culture?" Well, first of all, it's myopic to think you can change anyone who doesn't want to be changed. What we're really trying to do is provide choice. In postmodern society, if you're not educated, you really don't have a choice about how you live. If you can't live in that abstract representational world of paper and computers, it's problematic. And so we want to give those tools to them so that they can negotiate that environment if they should so desire.
Before we start thinking about Ruby Payne's work and the controversy also that surrounds it, I want to talk a little bit about my perception of Payne's work. I have been to Ruby Payne workshops, and I frankly walked away with some very valuable information. On the other hand, I also have spent a lot of time thinking about those who are critical of Ruby Payne's work, and I do also understand those perspectives. The one thing that I am very firm on in terms of the work of Ruby Payne is that she was the first person, truly the first person, who was willing to go out on a limb and talk about poverty. She was the person who widely opened a conversation about children who are under-resourced, who struggle in school, and why they struggle in school. And she was really the first person who made an attempt to engage teachers in a discussion about activities and strategies that could help children of poverty be more successful. The controversy certainly rages on. We will look at her work and then we'll look at the controversy, and then I'll encourage you to think about where you stand on this issue. But again, I think that the contribution that Ruby Payne has made to educational thought is that poverty does have an impact. So why study the impact of poverty? Well, Payne says that understanding the culture of a group and the values of a group, and in this case, those who live in poverty, can help educators to be more understanding and less judgmental about that group. Again, children of poverty. That suggests that we don't understand poverty, and that suggests that typically we may be judgmental about a certain group, and again, in this case, children of poverty. Ruby Payne also says that educators can see opportunities for teaching students rather than judging them or stereotyping them. I think this is really pretty interesting because these are the issues that Payne is most criticized for. She is criticized for her use of a phrase called the culture of poverty. And critics sometimes suggest that there is not a culture of poverty, and that is very stereotypical and very deficit oriented. And we'll talk more about that phrase, deficit orientation, as we progress. Payne believes that poverty is the extent to which an individual does without resources. This is her definition for poverty. That is also the definition for poverty that we use at the Center of Excellence. We believe that we're really talking about resources, the opportunity to have access to the kinds of things that can help a person be more successful in life, the resources that one has in one's life. Payne believes that there are many resources that contribute to successful lives. Financial resources is one of those. And when we think about financial resources, we're talking about money to purchase goods and services. And this is probably the resource with which we're most familiar, and the resource that we would most often associate with poverty or not living in poverty. Emotional resources are another category of resources that Payne identifies as important for success in life. And she defines emotional resources as the ability to choose and control emotional responses so that we know which emotional response to provide at the appropriate time and given certain circumstances. And I've included a screenshot here that really sort of illuminates the dimensions of emotional responses and how broad that continuum is. You can see that there are, for example, if you just think about the word angry, you can see here mean and rage are both illustrated. There's so many nuances of emotional responses, and so you can see why if a child does not have one of these resources, he's not able to dig deep and access these emotions so that he can engage in social regulation that is appropriate for a certain circumstance, and you can see why that might cause him to be less successful, and that is really the grounding for inclusion of emotional resources as one of those that contributes to successful living. Payne also identifies mental resources as one of those resources that are important for success. Mental resources are defined as the mental abilities and the acquired skills needed to deal with daily life. What does our brain tell us to do? What cognitively what cognitive strategies can we pull to access and use in a variety of circumstances, whether it's in academic activities at school or decision making about life choices, and also engagement with the arts, engagement with other persons, and just how we cognitively move ourselves through the world. Spiritual resources, or a belief in a divine purpose and guidance, is another whole category of resources that a child might enter school with or not enter school with. And here we're not talking about religion, we're not specifically talking about a faith, but it is a belief that there's something bigger than me, there's some guiding factor that I use to move myself through the world and to inform the decisions that I make. Payne also identifies physical resources, the availability of physical health and means for mobility. I look at the physical resources piece perhaps a little more broadly than does Payne. I'm thinking here about our kids who have access to good medical care, to child checkups, to medical resources that are going to enable them to be healthy, to be ready to learn when they approach formal public school or private. Payne also believes that support systems are very important for success in school and in life. She defines support systems as friends, family, and backup resources. These are the people that surround us and lock arms with us and help us make our way through the world. And I think we probably all agree that it's very helpful to have support systems. I'm mindful of what it felt like for me when I moved to California and had no family for the very first time within a driving distance or easy contact, and how it was a challenge to create a whole new set of support systems. One thing that I remember is that it was pretty easy to do so because I had a job and I had a car and I had money, and I also had a new husband who had a range of persons in his life that embraced me and welcomed me. As we think about the access of support systems, and we particularly in terms of those who live in poverty, I think it's important that we consider how difficult it is when one does not have resources and when one is oftentimes isolated because of lack of transportation or lack of resources, financial resources. Payne also identifies relationships and role models as an important resource that can help one be more successful. I think this is very close to the presence of support systems, but she specifically defines this as access to those who are nurturing and not self-destructive. And so I think we're really talking about nuclear family members and perhaps extended family members as well. But these are the people who are guiding us and teaching us about how to grow up and be a good man, or how to grow up and be a good woman, and also how to take on the roles of motherhood and fatherhood, and to carry out those roles with dignity and with love and with support for those around us. So if we think about who our children are who are living in poverty, and we think about the role models and relationships that they have in their lives, we know that there is a very, very large population of kids who live in poverty who are in single-parent homes. The extent to which they have access to that other parent or someone who takes on the role of that other parent, we don't really know. But Payne believes that it is very important for our kids to have good role models, and to that those role models and the relationships are part of what causes kids to move forward, to try hard, to value education, for example, and to just kind of keep pushing even when things are tough. So what can we do as teachers? I think we probably all agree that we can't fix everything, and that's not our role. But what Payne talks about is that there are some of the resources that we can have an impact on. And for example, she believes that we can have a very positive impact on mental resources. Uh, and very simply, we can help kids read, write, and compute. And I think probably most teachers believe this is the primary focus of their work, of their life of service, and that is to help kids to grow cognitively, to enable them to make use of that wealth of cognitive ability that is maybe largely untapped until they reach school. So that's one of the resources that teachers can help kids to access and to grow and to cultivate in ways that can help them be successful. Support resources are also and it also includes an area of kinds of things that teachers can help kids to access and to take advantage of. One example is helping kids to complete college applications, helping them to find a job, helping them to figure out how to solve a problem. These are the kinds of support resources that we can provide as classroom teachers and as school leaders simply by being available and being accessible. Of course, part of that availability and accessibility means that we present ourselves to our students in a way that they perceive us to be viable means of support, and sometimes that's where the breakdown falls. I believe is that we perceive ourselves to be means of support, but perhaps our students don't perceive us in that way. And then Payne believes that we can be a resource for emotional support for students, and the example that we provide here is that working to help a student learn how to persevere or how to just keep going through difficult times, and again it's hard sometimes to make a clear distinction between emotional support and emotional resources and support resources. I think that they oftentimes overlap greatly, but the idea is that we are there for kids in ways that extend far beyond the curriculum content that we're mandated to teach, or the Common Core standards, for example. So we've reached the end of our conversation about resources and defining resources according to the Payne model. And I want to encourage you now to give a little thought to your students. I encourage you to get out your class roll. Sometimes I think that if we just sit back and close our eyes and we start thinking about students, we sometimes leave one off that we might need to include in our thought process. So I'd like to encourage you to think for a moment about your students. Do you have any students who appear to be living with limited resources or with no resources? Do they have resources that are missing for them? And I want you to think a little bit about how that plays out in your classrooms and in your school. I want to also encourage you to observe students, both in instructional settings and formal instruction, but also for those of you who are elementary teachers on the playground, as they arrive and as they depart, and for those of you who teach older students, how are they in the cafeteria and in the hallways and at pep rallies? How do they seem to interact with other students, and do you see any signs that they may be living without resources? And that brings us to the second assignment of this module. This assignment actually has two parts. And what you see pictured here is the first part. And there is a chart that you will find posted on Blackboard, and you'll be able to access this chart. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to consider the kids in your school or in your classroom and to think about at least one student who might be living without resources. Now, I've included along the left column the type of resource that might be missing. And what I'd like for you to do is to try to identify a child in each of these areas, a specific student who is living without or appears to be living without one of these resources. Now, you only have to do 4 of the 5. And if you have issues and you just don't have students that you believe would fit into one of these categories, then just email me and explain your circumstances, and we'll figure out where to go. But my goal is for you to identify at least 4 students. I suppose it could be one student who fits into more than one category, but I'd like for you to address at least 4 of the 5 categories. I want you to first identify a student, and you do not need to include their name, but you might include some very basic personal identifiers, age, grade. You might include, if you know this, ethnicity, family structure. If you know anything about the family, the parent's educational level, that might also be important to include. So identify a student who is missing that resource, and then in that same column, explain how you believe that child is suffering as a result of that missing resource, or how that child is making their way less competently through school and through life because that resource may be missing. And then over to the right, you can see that that column is divided by a dotted line. Above the line, I'd like for you to identify a goal that you could put into place for yourself that is intended to support that student. What could you do for a student that is missing a financial resource? What could you do for that student who is missing an emotional resource? What could you do? What is within your means to assist that student? Now, of course, in the case of financial resources, I'm not suggesting that you sell your house and provide money. That's not certainly not where we're headed with this. But if a child is living without financial resources, is there a place that you could guide them? Is there something that you could offer, some other means to replace the missing finances? For example, one of you talked about in your last assignment, you talked about sharing clothing or pointing a student to a clothing bank that could help to provide the student with a warm coat as these days get chilly. So that's an example of a goal that you want to help a child have replace a missing resource or extend or grow a missing resource. And then secondly, in that same space, what specific strategy will you employ? And this is really important that you speak in terms of a specific strategy, because you'll see on the next slide that you're going to actually put that strategy into place and then report on how it works. So be certain that you're thinking here in terms of something that you will definitely do, not some great idea, but one that is really not feasible or realistic. Okay, so now we have part 2 of assignment 2.1, and as you can see, it's set up very similarly to the previous slide. Here, you're going to engage in action research, and what I'd like for you to do is actually attempt to provide support for a student who is living without resources. So if you identified a student who was living without resources, now's your time to put that strategy into place that you planned previously. And in the center column, what you'll talk about are your outputs. And in action research, what we're really talking about here are what are the specific steps that you took? What were the strategies that you employed? You can also include a bit of a narrative on how it went, the roadblocks that you faced, how you overcame them. This is really a report on strategies. In the far right column, what you will report here are the outcomes that you are noticing. Now, there's only going to be a 2-week window of time for you to implement your strategies, and so the outcomes may not be readily available. You may not yet notice, or it could be that your implementation strategies are going to occur over an extended time. Certainly, if we could solve all of the problems associated with limited resources in a 2-week period of time, we wouldn't be engaging in this discussion through this course. We'd just take care of the resources and boom, we'd be done. So I understand that you will probably not have complete successful outcomes here, but what I'm going to encourage you to do is just report on where you stand at the 2-week mark. Now, it's going to be very difficult, obviously, to do this if you complete this assignment on October 29th, and the due date is the 30th. And so I understand that's certainly a possibility in terms of how you may move through this work. But know that we will come back to this, and that the expectation is that this is a work in progress, and that at some point in time, as we proceed with our study, I'll ask you to revisit this and to either consider, have your effects continued, have they grown, have they washed out, or what has happened as a result of the strategies that you've implemented. And so in this far right column, you'll tell what outputs occurred, what outcomes occurred as a result of your outputs, and what are the implications of this assignment for you and for the student. Ruby Payne also talks about hidden rules. She spends quite a bit of time in her trainings and her workshops talking about the impact of unspoken cues and habits of a group. She talks about these hidden rules as being those top secret things that we don't specifically spell out, but that are very much a part of certain circumstances and situations, and she also talks about them being very prevalent in certain cultures. And she talks at length about the differences in the hidden rules in a middle-class culture versus a culture of poverty. Okay, guys, I'm sorry. One of the most popular chick flicks of all time, Pretty Woman, one of my favorite movies of many years ago. You may remember this scene where Julia Roberts is taking instruction on what fork to use and how to know which fork to use. This is an example of what we're going to talk about next, which is what Ruby Payne calls the hidden. Perhaps you set your table like this at home. I certainly do not. In our home, setting the table might be to, on many crazy evenings, it may be to sit the McDonald's bag in front of us on the countertop, and that's the extent of setting the table. But there are people who do set the table like this, and we've all probably experienced what it feels like to go to a fancy restaurant with linen tablecloths and to be faced with multiple forks and knives and glassware, and to have to make a decision about what do I use and when do I use it. Now, some of us may have been fortunate enough to have had some instruction. Maybe you are a kid whose mom made you go to cotillion or etiquette classes, and you learned some of these kinds of things so that you wouldn't be panicky when you were faced with it, but this is an example of a hidden rule that many kids are not taught, that many of us are not taught. And Ruby Payne believes that hidden rules extend far beyond table settings, and that there are many rules that are become the norm for a certain society that don't transfer from one socioeconomic status to another. Perhaps you have kids who come into your classroom and they don't seem to know the rules, common rules for classroom behavior. I know that as a kindergarten teacher, we had a lot of kids who came to school on those first days of school and they didn't know how to walk in a line or sit in a circle. And that didn't necessarily mean that they weren't smart. What it meant was they'd never been to school before. And that's really what Ruby Payne is alluding to with her hidden rules, is that if you have not lived in a certain environment, you may not know the rules of that environment. And she challenges us to consider what kind of rules might be present in our classrooms that our students don't understand or perhaps have never been taught. So why do we need to teach hidden rules? And this is the crux of her thinking, is that we must specifically and explicitly teach those rules that are not outwardly apparent to those who maybe have not lived in middle class. So I guess my first question for you is, are there really hidden middle class rules? Ruby Payne believes that there are. And she further believes that students should be taught those hidden rules of middle class because without this knowledge, it can prevent them from moving upward in a career or getting the position they want. And again, we might think about that picture from Pretty Woman and the instruction on using the silverware. Could someone become upwardly mobile in a career if one lacks the etiquette-oriented behaviors and skills that really have nothing to do with intelligence and have far more to do with experience? So now's the time for you to begin to think about the rules that might be hidden in your classroom or in your school. Are there expectations that you have that your students are not able to meet? Expectations that perhaps you might think, well, everybody should know that. Everybody should know how to take notes. Everybody should know how to work in a group. Everybody should know how to cooperate. Everybody should know how to respond to a question or to wait his or her turn. These are just some examples, and are they classic middle class rules, or are they school rules? Next, I want you to think about specifically middle class oriented rules. Are there things that middle class kids do that kids of poverty can't do? This is one of the real controversies that surrounds the work of Ruby Payne. Some people believe that when she suggests that there is a middle-class culture and a poverty culture, that leads to prejudices and stereotyping. And so I encourage you to stop for a moment and to think about your students. Again, get that class roll out and go through it student by student, face by face, and consider how well each child functions in your classroom, and are there expectations that you have that perhaps a child who doesn't function so well, could there possibly be some expectations that you have that child has never had the opportunity to learn or to be taught? Again, it has nothing to do with how smart they are, how intelligent they are, or again, how much they're loved at home, but instead has to do with access to opportunities to learn those rules.